Hi, and welcome to Sci-Fi Author Chat. Tonight we have Mia V. Moss. Welcome, Mia.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing great. So I'm going to introduce you to our viewers and listeners and readers, and we'll talk about what brought you into this genre, your latest wonderful new release, and everything else kind of in your background, and ask some fun curveball questions too. So here we go. So Mia Moss is a writer of science fiction and fantasy, a runner, and inconsistent gardener. I kind of know how that is. She currently lives in the Bay Area in a warehouse guarded by feral cats, where she is hard at work on her debut epic fantasy novel. She would be delighted to share her cookies and gin. I would be too. Magic Robot Carnival is her blog where she discusses all of the above and likely posts lots of photos of her pets. Well, aren't we blessed? And I see one there. Who is
Oh,
this?
this is Nari making a cameo behind me.
Hi, Nari. I love pet cameos. It's definitely one of my favorite things. So, first of all, congratulations
Thank you.
release. Let's talk about it a little bit if you want to. My Ties for the Lost. It's got this wonderful cover, and the premise is just hilarious. I'm going to read the blurb that's on the book. So it just cracked me up. I loved it. Meryl Nightingale is a professional pain in the ass. As Electric Blue Moon's only licensed private investigator, she's the one who snoops the closets of the elite, who think the laws don't apply to them. But when the son of a wealthy family turns up dead, it's Meryl's closet that everyone is suddenly interested in. That dead playboy in the foyer, it's her adoptive sibling, Rocket Nightingale. Now, Meryl's dodging gossip columnists who smell blood in the water, renegade corporate IP with minds of their own, and badge wearing bone breakers who would love nothing more than to ship her back to the surface, which is still on fire, thank you very much. If Meryl can't catch the killer, then the case is going to sink the Nightingale Electric Detective Agency. Welcome to the city under the sea, an old money refuge for the environmentally ravaged, where humanity is trying to forget its past with ink-stained cocktails, designer drugs, and genetic modifications, where Meryl Nightingale may be the last honest scoundrel. So that is an amazing premise. I love it a lot. The title is awesome. So let's talk about what brought you into this genre and made you tell this story. Like, how did you start falling in love with science fiction as a genre?
Oh, geez. I have loved science fiction for basically ever. I grew up with two parents who, we had Star Trek and Doctor Who and all of that on the on television in the early 80s and throughout the 90s, and a shelf full of, whatever the year's best science fiction and fantasy anthologies were that year. So just, yeah, I was fully immersed in the genre.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I've always loved it. And for this book in particular, I came to it through fashion, actually. The first inspiration I had for this book was I saw an artist's rendition of what like their version of a diving mask, which was very like fashion forward, and it was so cool looking. And my first thought was like, rich people are going to be wearing these under the sea with their own bespoke mermaid outfits. I just know it, and I'm
Yep.
jealous already. And and that was like my first image for this whole book, was just this like undersea party of fabulously wealthy
Fabulous.
people. Yeah.
That's fabulous. Although, I mean, I totally agree with you. That's absolutely going to happen. So
Yeah.
the cover alone is just so much fun, just so vivid. You've got just look at it. I mean, I wish I could share it on the screen here, but you can see it back in the corner there of your room.
Yeah.
So, why did you decide octopus? Or was that? Did you have a say in that, or was that your publisher? Because I love that cover so much because it sort of has the bioluminescence of
Yeah.
undersea. That's
Yeah, it was my publisher at Underland Press that created the cover, and I am so happy and
yeah,
grateful for it, because yeah, like the minute I saw it, I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is so beautiful. I can't believe this is on my book.
wonderful.
So yeah. Yeah.
That's fabulous. And I love too that this is a mystery. This is a mystery happening in the future in which things are really bad above the surface, and So I'm powerfully intrigued. I can't wait to get this in my hands. And, if you want to support a local bookseller up there, do let us know who you prefer to get this wonderful book from.
Honestly, whichever your favorite local bookseller is, here in the Bay Area, I love Green Apple Books. So yeah, yeah, they're so great. But down south, Space Cowboy is amazing in Joshua Tree. Yep.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to jump back into some more questions now related to your sort of, let's call it a superhero origin story, since that's what we kind of have to be as writers sometimes. So, I'm going to ask some typical questions like, who were your greatest influences and what were they? Like books, shows, film. Are there some things that we could definitely pick up on if we read your book and we know we're like, oh yes, absolutely, you can draw a line from these.
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if I have any super direct influences. I have a ton of influences. In books, Cage Baker was a huge influence of mine. Her company series about time traveling immortal cyborgs is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. And going back to the classics like Ursula K. Le Guin, I grew up reading her stuff. And so she's had a huge influence on me. And also along those same lines would be Ray Bradbury. I think just a huge, huge fan of his all throughout my life. So
Yeah, same. He's one of the
yeah,
most influential, figures in my writing career as well. Can't go wrong with Ray, right?
yeah.
So, in your background, what do you draw upon when you're writing your work that you sort of interweave? It's very, very Mia Moss in everything.
I think most of so I have a few short stories published now. I've got this novella. I'm working on an epic fantasy, and I think that the all of those have a few things in common. I love writing about food and drinks. um,
That's one reason I wanted to interview. I was like, this gal is on my wavelength. I
yes.
love it. Awesome.
Yeah, and I love writing about nature in settings that I think uh in my work I try to touch upon just like the environment a lot, that whatever the characters are in. I draw a lot of inspiration from both California, where I was born and where I currently live, and also the Pacific Northwest, where I spent most of my life. So, and yeah, I constantly fall in love with whatever environment I go to. So in the desert or the forest or the ocean, every time I go out, like just camping or hiking or something, I'm like, I want to stay here forever. I want to stay here forever. And so yeah, everywhere I go, basically I just like kind of just like absorb as much as I can of those environments and put them into the stories I write as well.
Fantastic. I love that. What would you say, when you're writing these stories, like I'm not going to just be like pantser plotzer, but I do kind of wonder when a story takes shape in your mind, how do you take it from there and make it into the tapestry that is your work? Let's just put it that way.
I use sticky notes so much.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, so I used to think that I was just not a plotter whatsoever because I had this idea in my head that an outline had to be, like one, two, three. Um, but along the way, I developed my own way of writing an outline, which was really whenever I start a new story, I basically try to tell it as quickly as I can, as if I were telling it to like just summarizing it to a friend. And that's my outline is like, yeah, like a 2 to 3 page document that's just like blah blah blah, this happens, and then the end. And then I take that and I then start breaking it up, and I do free form it a lot, but along the way, as I'm working on the first draft and subsequent drafts, I these all of these walls just get covered. I have like 8 different colors of sticky notes for different types of aspects of stories, and they just get covered. Yep.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I like the colorful sticky.
Yes. I think we have the same set.
It's the best, you know.
Yep.
I love that too that you talk about like you're telling a story, and that's a wonderful thing because I think a lot of writers get a little bit worked up over, for example, when you have to give a synopsis of the story. But you just told us all exactly probably the best way to do it. Just act like you're telling someone the story. I love that, and I've never really heard that before. But it's brilliant and it's simple and it's just great for aspiring writers. So thank you for that. Great. So what would you say are like some subgenres of sci-fi that you might like that you've explored or that you're working on? You did mention that you're writing high fantasy, which is a big change and really awesome too. But what would you say is your favorite subgenre of sci-fi?
Ooh, I really love cyberpunk. And I don't think that I feel intimidated by all the great cyberpunk that's out there already. I don't know if I will ever like fully branch out myself into that, but it's kind of like a dream goal to get good enough to write it. But I love, love, love just diving into near future, not necessarily dystopias, although there are a lot of great dystopian stories out there too that I think I don't know, I find some kind of dark hope in them a lot. Yeah, so yeah, just I love cyberpunk. I love gritty kind of getting into the heart of cities stories in science fiction. Yeah.
Well, and you live in the Bay Area, so you have, San Francisco right at your doorstep, basically, to kind of see the glorified side and then the seedy side, of the city.
Oh yeah.
I had lived there in 2005 for a little while, and I've always loved San Francisco, so I kind of feel like I've seen it go through those changes. So it's really interesting to think about cyberpunk and that relationship to that urban environment, which is really cool. But I bet you'd have a wonderful cyberpunk story. So,
We'll see.
wow, I hope so. I think we'd be in for a treat. So, like, when you're doing your writing, when you're really into it, like, what does a productive writing day for you look like? How do you go about the day?
Um, so I have to start early, early, early in the day because the later I find that the later it gets in the day, the more the real world just starts kind of taking over brain space, and I have such a hard time getting back into the world that I'm working on. So I'm not naturally a morning person, but I kind of had to make myself become one, and just get up as early as I could and make some coffee and start writing. So. I try to start as early as possible, and then I just kind of first one thing I do is I try to never read back through what I've already written in a draft because I find that if I start doing that, then I'll start like trying to edit it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that's been such a huge like just wormhole for me in the past. So I try to always start like right where I left off
Okay.
and rely back onto my sticky notes to help kind of figure out where I was going next with it and my outline or like my synopsis. And I use Scrivener for pretty much everything I write, which is amazing. It's a really complicated tool. In some ways, there's so many functions of it that I have no idea how to use, and I've never touched. But what I love about it though is that it's kind of a collective binder where you can have like a sheet of like graphics that just inspire you, like mood board kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And note cards and so like I've got like outline of like profiles for certain main characters that I can go back to. For the book I'm writing right now, I have kind of like a whole world Bible going on because there's so much world building in it.
Yeah, with
And
the
that's
high fantasy. Yeah.
yeah. So, and that's all in the Scrivener file that I have for it. So I kind of like I'll go through and touch on those if I am having a hard time getting started for the day, but then I'll just kind of get into whatever chapter I left off on and just go to it until the real world calls me back.
It sounds really disciplined, and I'm really impressed. So that's a really cool way to do things. And it sounds like you're doing what works for me on the best days, which my days are slightly chaotic sometimes with teenagers, in the mix. But like when you have that regularly scheduled work time, it is work, and I feel like that really kind of it helps you get things done. And then, it's kind of nice the way you do it, that you do it early and then you have the rest of the day to kind of process the real world and get on with your life, outside of the writing. So kudos. That's excellent, excellent
Thanks.
process. And so like okay, so you're working and you're craving something. So what's your craving that you have when you're writing? Do you treat yourself to something?
Yes. So I try, I will usually always have coffee, and that's just kind of like a must have when I'm writing, even if I don't really like need it. I just have to have that cup of coffee with me. But for food, generally it's going to be just like some chocolate or
Nice choice.
yeah. I think that's usually like my standard
Yeah.
is chocolate. If in the before times, before the pandemic, when I could actually go to coffee shops, it would be definitely like a croissant for sure. But
Nice.
yeah.
Excellent. Good taste. So let's talk about what your dream project would be. You're already working on high fantasy. What else have you got cooking down the line? Do you have like some sort of goal in mind that you want to make happen?
I really like, honestly, my dream project is the one I'm working on right now because it is hopefully going to be 3 books and very long ones. And it's intimidating because, I keep reading yeah, in the writer sphere online, like, oh, agents don't want to sign a first time writer with a long book or an epic book because they haven't proven their chops yet. Um and that makes me really nervous because, like, yeah, I don't have representation right now with the novella, but and I am looking for an agent for this book that I'm writing right now, and it's humongous already. And I hope that I can convince them that it's good enough to not only pick up this one but the other two, because this is a story that I started working on it actually 20 years ago, and
Oh,
I
right.
put it away. I haven't been writing on it consistently for that long, but I put it away for a long time. Over, like the course of my 20s, there was kind of these ups and downs where, like, I internalized a lot the idea that, like, that writing fiction was not a serious career and I needed to work on something serious to make money, which made me miserable, and I missed it so much. And so when I came back to writing, full speed, like, yes, this is who I am and this is what I want to do, I came back to that project, and the draft that I wrote 20 years ago was horrible,
Yeah.
as it's going to be. And so I kind of had to pick it up and basically start all the way from scratch again, but with the core of that story at its heart. And I want so much for it to be out in the world.
It will be, and I will tell you that I had a very similar track in which I had written what is now the Questers on Saga when I was 13 and 14, and it has gone through many iterations over the years. And I went through a period of time in my teens and 20s in which I had, yeah, the whole career thing and trying to figure that out and everything, and but all the time the story was there. So I'm so elated that you're doing this, and you are absolutely going to find an agent. It's going to work out. I know this, and so I'm super excited that you're getting back to that story because that's been your dream for so long. So that's fantastic. Good job.
Thank you.
I'm excited for you because I know that you're doing what you love, and that feeds into making the book better. I think, you know,
Yeah.
once we sort of embrace that side of ourselves, right? So,
Yes. And congratulations to you too
well,
on
thank you.
going back to yours. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
so it's we writers, we're a weird lot, right? We're always writing, I say, in our minds, and even something that we left decades ago, we still it's still there. It's still the garden, and all we have to do is water the garden, right?
Uh,
Maybe fertilize it once in a while.
A
Get the weeds out,
few
but
times.
come back to it, and as a gardener, So,
Yep.
yeah, well, that's great. So, all right, so I'm going to throw you a curveball here. So, in the movie Blade Runner, we talked about cyberpunk, right? So, the Voight Kampf test, where you prove whether or not you're a replicant or a human. So, What's one thing that would tip people off that you're a human or a replicant? So let's start with human. How would they know, yep, that's really you?
Ooh. Okay, if you needed to know if it was really me, I would say you would ask me. Hmm. It's a hard question. Um,
Your Paul. It's all good. There's no wrong answer.
you would ask me what you would ask me to make you a cocktail. I think that would be a great way.
There we
Yeah.
go. Boom,
Yeah.
there it is. All right. And
Yeah.
yes, that would be awesome. Okay, so now we're going to flip it. So, what's something like some sort of habit you have that people are like, you're definitely a robot? Like something just quirky or that would people would be like, I don't know. You say you're human, but
I think that might have to be just go on a nature walk with me and just point out wait for me to point out all of the invasive species on the trail. That's such
I
a bad
love it.
habit I have. Because I know most of them at this
That's
point.
outstanding.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about that then. So, you know about an invasive species. How is it that you are so into that? Like, can you talk about your background that may have, led to that point where you're an expert in that?
Yeah, so when growing up in the Portland area in the Pacific Northwest, there is a huge issue up there in the woods with invasive Himalayan blackberries and invasive English ivy. And in
It's terrible. Yeah.
yeah, it's really bad and it just grows like crazy and you can't really, especially the blackberry, you can't really ever fully get rid of it because it digs canes into the ground. And then just sprouts up everywhere it touches. And in growing up in that area, a popular like volunteer project in high schools and beyond is, sending the kids out to pull the blackberry weeds. So that was something that I had a lot of experience with, and it just kind of like embedded itself in my mind as like, oh, these freaking blackberries, they are just everywhere and I can't stand them. And I have a huge passion for like rewilding local spaces. This is what I need to update my biography because I no longer live in that warehouse surrounded by feral cats. I moved into a full house and yeah, in this winter, and the front yard was basically just like overgrown with invasive weeds. And so it's been a big project over the last 6 months of getting rid of that and putting in a ton of local native California plants that work in the area. And yeah, it's been so rewarding and amazing to experience and like watch nature come back into that space.
That's really cool. And so, I have an ecology background. That was my degree. And so I feel very passionately about that too. And I love that you're working on this, both from a gardener and an environmentalist standpoint, trying to bring back, native pollinators and beneficial insects and birds and things like that. So, yes, I love to hear it. Now, when you're gardening, do you find that you're thinking about story and elements of plot, things like that, or characters, or
Sometimes they do, yeah. Sometimes it's I'm a little more focused on the project at hand. But yeah, for sure when I am just kind of, zoning out, I do start just drifting into thinking about what I'm working on right now or what I might want to work on later.
do you think that you'll add some of those elements to your fiction, or have you already?
I definitely, yes, yes and yes.
Right.
In the yeah, the gardening comes up a lot in the fantasy I'm working on right
Yes.
now. Yeah, and invasive species and their mutations have come up in my science fiction that I've written so far. There's a short story I wrote that's set in the same universe as My Ties for the Lost. It's in a book called it's in a short story anthology called Cat Ladies of the Apocalypse,
Oh
and
my
it
God,
is
I love that.
yeah. When I saw that call for submissions, I was like,
You're in.
sold. Yeah. And I was so happy when they accepted one of my stories.
Oh, congrats. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah. It's called Sushi and Chocolate and Coffee. Um, I
Oh,
think I got those in the right order. And It's those are the names of this woman's cats. And yeah, so I focused a lot on invasive species, both plant and animal, in that story as well.
Oh my God, I've got to read that. That's so fabulous. I love it. Awesome. So we're going to move on to some other things. Like this one is always one that I love to hear about because I've heard so much stuff over the years. But what's the worst writing advice you've ever received?
Ooh. Um, let's see. The worst writing advice I have ever received would be there's a lot of bad writing advice out there. Now and of course now that I'm thinking about it, my mind is blanking. I think so one thing that never worked for me that I tried to make work because I heard it from a writing teacher was always start at the beginning. Like nail down your first sentence and then keep going. And
Mm,
maybe that works for some people, but yeah,
no.
not me.
I'm the same way. Like, and sometimes, you'll think this great scene of dialogue, and you're like, this is like 20 chapters down the line, but I need to
Yes.
write this down and I'm going to put a little, little tag there and come back to it. And, I mean, I know the story, right? But, I love to hear how it is for you. And so I agree, like, you don't need to write in any particular order. The story's going to get told, just do the writing.
Yes. Yeah. You know, totally nailed it. Yeah. When I tried to adhere to that, like always start with your first sentence, it just tripped me up for so long.
Well, and then, like I get where they're coming from that especially when you're teaching a class and you want there to be some sort of outline. They have their own outline coming in as a teacher. They want to go on this curriculum, and the syllabus and everything like that, but some of us just don't write the way that things are taught. Um,
Yep.
we don't it's writing, it's not teaching, right? So yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So I want to talk. Can we talk about your website because I love it. I really love it, and
Thank you.
yeah, it's magicrobotcarnival.com. And what I love about this is this is not like your typical writer's website. This is so much delight and personality, and I was just instantly obsessed. So you've got home, about, works, contact, breakfast cereal, and this is just a delightful set of it's basically your Substack.
Yes,
Yeah,
the breakfast cereal, it's been on hiatus for most of the pandemic.
I relate.
Yeah, I do plan on getting back to it, and hopefully this year. But the premise, I've always kind of, when people complain about how you have to read through a novel to get to a recipe on recipe blogs,
Oh God, yeah, jump the recipe.
yeah.
Not
I
always
I
though.
kind yeah.
Yeah, sometimes.
I I thought, like what if it was an actual story though? And so that was the whole
Yeah.
premise behind it. It's a science fiction story. It's a recipe blog and a science fiction story told from the perspective of a woman named Harper who has landed on a planet that humans are colonizing, and she puts a recipe in it as she explores the planet.
I love this so much.
Thank you.
This is like the best thing ever. This is so my jam. So also though on the site is the Stardust Dispatch, and that is just a fabulous name. And that is your monthly newsletter.
Thank you.
So
Yes. Yep.
I have signed up. I can't wait to see it. And I love the fact, just going to read this because I just love it so much. Hello, friends. The Stardust Dispatch is my monthly newsletter filled with updates on my current projects, new release info, exclusive excerpts, upcoming events, and the occasional free TTRPG map or cocktail recipe. A pet picture is guaranteed every month. Oh my God. Glad to have you along for the ride. And then when you subscribe, you get a free short story. You get sushi and chocolate and coffee. Sci-Fi story. So, oh my God, this is just so much fun. Like everything about, My Ties for the Lost looks like a blast. The website's wonderful. This is just pure delight. And I can't wait to see what else you've got coming too.
Thank you so
So,
much.
but right now, I'm going to steer it back to you and let you have some talk. Like, do you want to talk about My Ties for the Lost and tell us everything you need to know about that, and where to get it, and where to find the rest of your fiction?
Yeah. First, I want to give a shout out to Danica Coral, who I should have a link to her site on the bottom of my website, but she's the one that did those fabulous graphics for me.
They're really
And
cool.
yeah, I
Yep,
love them
I
so
see it.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
great. Yeah, she was amazing to work with on creating the site, and she does such wonderful work. So,
Yeah.
but back to my ties for the lost. Yeah, I let's see. I am outlining the second book for it now.
Pieces?
Yeah, Underland Press wants to do more than just the first one, thankfully, which I'm
Yes.
so grateful and happy for. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so there will be at least two more Marrow Nightingale stories. I don't know yet
Marrow
if
Nightingale. Okay, I apologize. I messed that up earlier.
Oh, no, no,
Marrow
no.
Nightingale.
Um I think I might have just messed it up myself. I'm not used to talking about it as a series, but is the Nightingale Electric Detective Agency is the name of the series.
Awesome.
Yeah, and but yeah, so there's going to be more of those, at least two more, maybe more than that. I'm not sure yet. And I am super happy to have it out in the world finally. The characters in this story are I I set out to write a very kind of like gritty story where all the characters are a little bit assholes and like charming assholes, but still
Yeah.
kind of. But I ended up falling in love with almost all of them, and
Cool.
I'm so excited that they are finally out there for everyone
That's
to
great. And
enjoy.
then we get more of them, so that's even better.
Yeah.
So, like, if you had to pick a soundtrack of songs that would go with this book, like, do you have like a playlist, or do you have something in mind that just like, is there some yacht rock going on?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
let's hear
Yes.
it. What would you play?
There is so there is a on SoundCloud there is an artist, he's a DJ, his name is Lush Bunny, and he has a set list that I listened to pretty much on repeat for most of the editing of this book, called Yacht Music for Yacht People, and
I love it.
it is the perfect mix of yacht rock
That's
with a little bit of like kind of a modern house beat to it a little bit. And
Ooh, that sounds
yeah,
amazing.
it's really good. He's a great DJ. So yeah, that is the one I recommend listening to while reading this book.
Right on. Oh, it's so much fun. All right, let's see what else we've got going on here. And so, your short stories, when you started writing short stories, how do you think how does it feel to write short stories versus long fiction? Because I've only recently kind of come back to writing short fiction, and I'm curious how you feel do you go back and forth? Do you see yourself writing more short fiction?
I think I will eventually. I find writing short fiction much harder because you have to cram so much, right,
Exactly.
into yeah, a few thousand words at most. And um I have friends that write a lot of flash fiction, and I am just floored and amazed that they
Yeah,
can write such impactful stories in under 1,000 words. Like I don't think
it's
that
really
I
amazing,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's incredible. And so yeah, I find short fiction really challenging to write, but I do enjoy I like that it's done a lot faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love the quick turnaround for submissions.
Yes.
Yeah, that's also like when I wrote My Ties for the Lost a few years ago, and it took me 2 years of submitting to land it somewhere. But those 2 years, it wasn't, with short fiction, it's like Clark's World will, reject you in like a day.
Oh, I know, they're so fast.
Yeah, they're so
Ooh,
fast. And
I
with
appreciate it.
no
I appreciate it. Right.
me too. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
it. With novellas though, I was looking at like 3 to 4 months, sometimes longer, in getting a
Big delay.
response.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of those are like no simultaneous submissions, so I couldn't put it out anywhere else. So it was so much waiting, and I'm anticipating, with the whole hunt for an agent with the next story to be an even longer wait. So yeah, for short fiction, I love the fact that you can finish it faster, edit it faster, and then get it out there, and it's like going through that submission cycle just so much so quickly. I really appreciate that. And I find it a little, I think it is a little bit addicting too, right? Because
It is.
it feels so productive.
Right. Now, do you like that you can dabble in multiple genres and when you're writing the short fiction? Is that part of the challenge and the goal?
Yeah, I do love that too. You know, I've written some fantasy and some science fiction with short fiction. I haven't written any pure mystery yet or any kind of pure like literary fiction sort of short stories. Um, I've had a little bit of horror in my short stories as well,
Oh,
but
cool.
I've never written a full horror. But yeah, I love that you can that have that freedom to play around with the format and kind of write more experimentally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. So I've got to know now though about the cocktails. So you make custom cocktails just on the fly? Like, tell me about this. I need to know more because it's so cool.
I so yeah, it's I love um how creative you can get with the whole concept of building a cocktail, right? Like just all the different combinations of not only the alcohols but how they interact with syrups and fruit juices and so many types of bitters out there.
Mhm.
And I when I go to, you know, like a bar and they've got like a cocktail menu, like 20 different kinds. And there's a bar up in Portland called the Teardrop, and they have this great menu setup where they have like a handful of cocktails that they have come up with themselves at their bar, a handful of cocktails that their bartender friends from all across the world have come up with,
Cool.
yeah, and then another set that's like vintage cocktails that they've come up with, they've found in old recipe books. And I just love that so much, that like the whole act of just like sharing not only a piece of art with people that they can drink and enjoy and
Yeah.
experience very sensually, like you it also can carry this connotation of history with it. So yeah, I love the art of the cocktail,
So
and I
cool.
love sharing it with people. Yeah.
Well, I have to know. I mean, the logical question to ask is, would you write a cocktail cookbook, recipe book?
I don't know if I am expert enough to do that. I would love to, I think I would love to collaborate with an actual bartender on
That would
something like
be
that. Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
phenomenal. I would love doing that.
I think that would be quite the hit too. And then you know, like it's obvious that you love food, you love drinking. So I'm like, you could have a whole cookbook related to all your stories and foods and drinks. So I love it. That's very much my wheelhouse, and you know, I'm ready. I'm ready. Just you know, get it made. I'll buy it.
Yes. Okay.
Awesome. So now, what would you say if you could pick a totally different genre that you've never written in before that you kind of thinking about doing but you've never done? Maybe you find it like, ooh, I don't know if I'm ready yet, but like sort of a pie in the sky genre that you'd like to write in. What would it be?
I I think it would be horror. I love reading horror stories so much, especially the ones that cross over a little bit into fantasy. But
Yeah.
like Caitlin Starling's books are they're just like my jam so much right now. And yeah, I think I would love to one day tackle a gothic horror. But
Ooh,
yeah, I
yes.
would I would love to.
I hope you do. So cool. Awesome. So, all right. I would like to know if there is anything, you know, that you'd like to talk about that I haven't asked you yet.
Oh, I mean, we've covered so much. I don't know that I have anything to add to this. I think, you know, one thing that I would want to talk about in regards to my ties for the lost, is the the fact that as I'm writing this book and its subsequent sequels, I worry a little bit that I'm going too far down a rabbit hole of pessimism with regards to our climate, especially with what's coming out in the news all the time right now. My hometown up in Portland is experiencing yet another historic heat wave.
Triple digits. Yeah.
Yeah, and And we've got wildfires here, of course, again during wildfire season.
Uh-huh.
Um, so it is hard to not get too, bogged down by all of that. And it's hard to even call it pessimism because at this point it's just reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but I do always want to try and find some kind of nugget of hope in stories, even the ones that seem super dire. And so that is my goal with writing the Nightingale stories, is to find just those kind of like inklings of hope, and ways that people are surviving even the most unsurvivable circumstances.
I love that. That's a wonderful message. I love that you're promoting hope, and we could all use a little bit more of that. Well, Mia, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. This has been delightful talk, and everybody, pick up My Ties for the Lost.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. All right, take care.
You too.